Testing 1, 2, 3. Again. Good morning. If I could ask members of the Environment Committee and staff to take their seats, please. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour. And yes, this is only part of my normal voice, so if I'm speaking even less than usual, maybe a good thing. Welcome to this meeting of Environment Committee of October 5th. I'd like to start by, I have had no declarations of interest. Seeing none, then we'll move on to confirmation of minutes of June 16th, 2015 meeting. It's carried. Thank you. We'll go through the consent agenda, inquiries and motions. We had one inquiry with a response to that on that item.
Are you referring to
carried?
Item 1?
Yes, to item 1.
Response to inquiries?
Yes, response to inquiries.
The centerpiece issue of the last election.
Is that item carried? Thank you. Item 2, 2014 Drinking Water Quality Management System Annual Report.
Chair, I'm sorry. Are we?
You would?
You had referred to item 1?
I had referred to item 1, yes.
Okay. I have a short question on
All right.
that perhaps you can answer. On document 1, there are some outstanding inquiries from 2013 that appear that are rather innocuous. Solid waste fines by Councillor Fleury. Why are these? Have these not been? And it's this document there.
Mm-hmm. These were outstanding inquiries where responses had been given directly to the councillors involved, and we've been trying to clear those off, if you will, our undealt with items.
So they've been dealt with?
Yeah, they've been dealt with now.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Item 2 then, Drinking Water Quality Management System Annual Report. Is there questions? All right, we'll hold that item. Okay, item 3 then, Solid Waste Bylaw Amendment. Questions? All right, is it a question, very quick one to do now, or are there others, questions on that one? All right, Councillor Brockington then, if you'd like to.
Thank you. Just with the committee's indulgence for the solid waste bylaw amendment on page 2, at the bottom it says a proposed amendment to the bylaw in order to clarify the right of entry onto private property in order to inspect and enforce the bylaw. Could I just have a better understanding of what that would entail? Are we doing that now, and what are the expectations being granted for city staff to go on private property to inspect the contents of garbage? What does this mean? Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Marilyn Janot, you'll answer that? Yep.
Yes. Yes, we are currently.
Okay, I'd like to hold this because I have some issue with what I've just been told.
Sorry.
No problem.
We'll hold item 2 then. Sorry, item 3, thank you. Maybe it's not just my voice that's not working today. The Backflow Prevention Program Background and Policy Approval, we have a presentation there, so we'll be holding that item. Item 5, the Ottawa Eco District Sustainable Neighborhood Plan Endorsement. Is that item carried? Carried. Item 6, Schoolyard Tree Planting Grant Program Update. Councillor Brockton has questions. Okay, we'll hold that one. Item 7, Sewer Connection Bylaw Amendment Frontage Charges. Carried. And the Carlsbad Trickle Feed System Frontage Charge. Carried. All right. So, items held then. Item 3, Solid Waste Bylaw Amendment. I guess I'll be back to you, Councillor Brockington, if you want to lead off the questions there. Item 2 first. Drinking Water Quality Management System Annual Report, then. Councillor Cloutier, please.
Thank you, Chair. Madam, I just had a couple of quick questions on the report that we received. And it's just so that it's clear in my head. On page 2 of the report, Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change will be updating the standards. When do we expect that change of standards on drinking water?
So we've been expecting it for about a year now, and we haven't seen the ministry release them yet. So we believe it will be imminent. Hopefully in the next year, those will be updated.
In the next year?
We hope so.
Okay. And do we have any indication on what those changes in standard will consist of? Or will they involve change in operating procedures, changes in budget pressures? Do we have any indication of?
From what we understand, and we've been involved in some of the workshops in the development of comments and responses back to how the current standards are working. So a lot of them will be a bit more clarification where they were a bit more vague. And so certainly our external auditors have been saying that the City of Ottawa's operational plan is very good, and in some cases is a benchmark for a lot of the elements. So we're not expecting any major changes to affect our operational plan. And one particular change that we know that we'll be asking for is that the endorsement gets carried for each term of council.
Are they administrative changes at the Ministry of Environment or legislative changes that will go through provincial committees?
So they would be making changes to their standards. So it's legislative under the Safe Drinking Water Act, and then all of the municipalities' operational plan would have to be revised to make sure that they conform with those new standards.
Okay. And just to clarify, we don't anticipate that to be a big issue for the City of Ottawa.
We don't anticipate significant changes. I think that our operational plan has been very robust and doing quite well.
Okay. Merci, Madame Rose. Sur la page 3 du rapport, ça indique que nous avons 7 drinking water systems, mais il y en a seulement 6 à la page. We didn't lose a water drinking system, did we?
Non, le ministère de l'Environnement, comme il y a une licence pour le système central, et le système central a deux usines de traitement d'eau. Alors, on a les 5 puits communautaires, puis le système de l'usine de traitement de l'eau de l'île Lemieux et de Britannia pour un total de 7.
Okay. Just so that I'm clear, the accrediting agency is the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, the accrediting agency for our water system.
So the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, they contract to accredited body of authorization. So I'm not saying that correctly. So they have engaged two bodies that basically do the accreditation on behalf of the ministry. So, and our accreditation body is actually NSF. So they are our external auditors and do annual audits on our operational plan, and every 3rd year they come on site and do an on-site verification audit.
They do so on behalf of the Ministry of the Environment.
Yes.
Just, 1 or 2 more questions. And it was brought up this morning by, I think, Councillor Leap or Councillor McKenney, I'm not sure. The Shadow Ridge, there's an increase in nitrates, and we got an answer from Mr. Weir. The city is not the owner of that facility, is it? And if there's any corrective action, it would be at the cost of the owner? No, we're operating it, but we, the city, are not the owner of that system. Is that correct?
So that's correct. The city is the operating authority for Shadow Ridge. The owner is a developer, and so that's why we've put the notice to the developer to basically make him aware that there's a nitrates concentration trend and that he needs to make corrective measures acceptable to the City of Ottawa prior to the City of Ottawa taking ownership of those wells.
So we will, when the development is completed, become the owner of that
Yes.
water system.
So under the subdivision plan of agreement, there are certain criteria that need to be met, and then the City of Ottawa will become eventually the owner of that communal well system.
Okay. And just to clarify, for those who weren't at the briefing this morning, as Mr. Weir said, while the trend is has our attention, it is well within compliance.
And if you just hang on for
Yeah,
one
if we
second.
can, I think just to help out with this, I think from the picture is worth 1,000 words. I think this is quite illuminating in terms of these graphs. This is the concentration of nitrates in the raw water at the Shadow Ridge system. There are two separate wells. One indicated the trend in red, one in blue. For your information, on the left axis, we begin in November of 2008 up till November of 2014. And importantly is the heavy line at the horizontal line at the concentration of 10 milligrams per liter. That's the standard for nitrates in drinking water. So I think we can all see that there is a consistent trend upwards, but still well below the concentration or the standard. And I think this helps put this in perspective as to our concern and why it is we're raising it to the developer's attention at this point.
Good. Okay. My last question, and thank you for the time to ask these questions. On page 6 of the report, resources needed to maintain QMS. Will we see anything in the upcoming budget documents that will cause an undue budget pressure to maintain? And I'm not talking about the well-known 6% slated increase in water rates. However, that ends up falling in terms of variable or fixed rates. But any other undue pressures?
Chair, we are in the process of finalizing the operating budgets for drinking water going forward. This is an issue that will be addressed in that, but I, at this point, am not anticipating large pressures in this area. We will have to go through the prioritization, the capital project implementation approach, and see whether or not the prioritization of plans helps us in terms of addressing that, and we will continue to monitor going forward and perhaps bring this forward. If it's doesn't meet our requirements, we may have to bring this forward as an issue in future years.
Okay. And just a final question, the quality testing costs, is that the part of the rate-supported cost, or is it tax-supported cost?
No, all of the costs for the water quality programs are carried on the water rate cost in the operating budget.
Merci. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Cloutier, are there other questions on this item? Councillor Deleuze?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm just going to circle back to Shadow Ridge. I have a few questions for Mr. Weir, and thank you very much for last few days. It's been very, we've been getting lots of email and concern from residents, but I just have a question, multiple questions. The first one I'll start is, do we have any idea where the sources of the nitrate coming from?
We have, generally, we know where nitrates can come from, but we haven't identified, particularly in this situation.
And I understand the level is not a concern right now, but how many boil advisory water we have so far for this specific subdivision? Because I remember in the winter there is one, and I went outside with the staff, but I'm not sure.
We can get that information for you, but none of those boil water advisories are associated with nitrate concentrations.
Is that like because of failing system, or?
I think we will check and get back to you on it. I think it was a situation where we experienced some depressurization in the system, and as a result, in accordance with our protocol with Ottawa Public Health, a boil water advisory may have been issued, but we'll provide that information to you.
Thank you. What's action plan is going to be in place to be able to reduce this level of nitrate with working with the developer? Are we having any progress is, are we been having some cooperation with them, or like, where are we going with this?
At this point, we're not aware of a proposal that meets with our satisfaction on this issue. However, we think that the approach that we've taken will draw a response. You know, the developer will be responding to us, and we'll be able to work something out.
Okay. My other question will come back to say, we have right now, as you know, if my sources are right, Phoenix Homes already sold all these lots right now for phase 2, and they've been held to get building permits, so they can't build on that one until we find a solution. Is that responsibility of the developer to be working with the resident that they already bought these lots? And because we have lots of questions and emails from concerned residents.
I think Derek Moody has joined us here from Planning and Growth Management. I think it's perhaps best for them to address this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This development has a couple of complex or complicating factors to it, in that the home builders on the site are different than the developer themselves. Our issue really that we've had, or the struggle that's taken place, has been with respect to the capacity of the existing treatment facility. Since March of 2014, we have not allowed any further permits to be issued from the site because of capacity restrictions with the existing water treatment facility. And those permits will not be issued until the system is upgraded from a capacity perspective, and now also with the concerns related to nitrates, that's resolved as well.
Thank you, Mr. Moody. I mean, is it our responsibility to be dealing with those residents that they are right now, they're on hold, they don't understand, like there is an issue obviously right now reside between the developer, the resident, and the whole complex of the system. So is that our responsibility to be able to work with resident? And my other question we're going to relay, like, I believe if the chair allow me, like, I think we should be able, I'm not sure what we should have, an open house or send a letter, because there's lots of concern right now of resident about, you know, as you know, there's media and articles, and people always get they don't get the real story, the third story. I think if from our responsibility, we should go out and speak to those residents. Is it a letter or an open house or something in this? Because this really subdivision need to be addressed. There is multiple issue, and I personally think we should be proactive instead of sitting and waiting for the developer. And if we need to put pressure or to need to work with his lawyers or whatever the case it is. But there is residents here are paying the price, and they are really worried about their property and their value and their drinking system.
Mr. Chair, to answer the first question with respect to whether it's our responsibility to respond to residents or to work with residents who have been sold a home, you know, perhaps prematurely, you know, in a perfect world, it would not be our responsibility. I don't feel that, you know, legally it's our responsibility. However, as public servants and as the councillor's office, I'm sure can attest to over the years, you know, we have fielded a number of those calls, a number of those emails from homeowners who we are very empathetic with, that they're waiting to get into a home that they've purchased. You know, I wish I could say we didn't have to respond to them, but, you know, we do have, you know, while maybe not a legal responsibility, I think a moral responsibility to provide information where we can to those residents, understanding the, you know, the anguish that some of those hopeful home buyers are going through.
Thank you. If I might offer then, if we could give us direction that we obviously continue this conversation and see how we can, whether it's an open house or some other form of very clear communication, because as we're all acknowledging, there is some form of moral obligation to, if you will, bring down the level of worry, although this chart makes it quite clear that there's a big difference between an issue getting on the radar and it actually being something of imminent health concern for people in a situation like this. It's the worry, it's the concern, and the more we can do to address that, and soon the better. So let's talk after this about how we can do that. All right.
Certainly, Mr. Chair.
Is that sufficient, Councillor Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate it, and I just also want to thank Derek and Dixon on his keep working with our office and helping us, but this issue is becoming very concern for residents, and thank you very much for allowing me to speak on this item.
Thank you, Councillor Drews. Do we have others questions on this item? All right then, on this item then, is that carried? Thank you. Next item that was held, item 3, solid waste bylaw amendment. That was Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I was just wondering if I could get just a better understanding of what the city is currently doing and why the bylaw amendment is necessary. Can you just give me some context to this? What exactly are you trying to observe or investigate on private property that this amendment will help you with?
Currently, the city issues notices of violation and provincial offenses notices to residents that don't comply with our solid waste bylaw. And so one of the abilities to be able to open up bags and see, so for example, in a multi-residential building, you know, there's numerous people putting bags in a container, and so we have the ability to go into that container, open up those bags, and identify the offending resident that way.
So what are you doing now? This is just in the multi-unit residences. You're not doing any single-family home inspections for waste or recyclables, are you?
We will look at bags at the curb, but certainly we do not enter the home. But in a multi-residential building, garbage rooms are often in the basement of a building or in the parking garage, so we're actually entering their premises.
So will this bylaw amendment be part of a greater educational component where we're trying to convert more multi-unit residences that are not recycling or have not embraced this? It's one thing to enforce, but if we don't have this as part of a bigger package, then...
Yeah, and so this bylaw really is to protect the health and safety of our waste collection workers. And so if people are putting inappropriate materials in their garbage, such as syringes or chemicals that can cause injury to our waste collection operators, it's imperative that we have the ability to go back and first of all, educate, but also fine if they're doing something inappropriate that's dangerous, not only to our workers, but the public.
Perhaps I might just clarify then, this is quite different from the city ripping open a bag to try to assess the level of participation in our green bin program or recycling. This is actually a safety issue around certain types of dangerous materials that may be in particularly bags. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
The root of this is around occupational health and safety of our workers and the public, because, of course, as Ms. Journeau's pointed out, these bags exist at the curb and can pose a problem not only to our own workers but to the public going by for things like sharps and hazardous materials and things like that that we have found occasionally in some of those locations.
And we do carry out occasional opening of bags, but at a city site as opposed to ripping it out at the curb where we're, I believe it's typically anonymous at that point. We're just evaluating what the level of participation is as opposed to, did number 19 X Street, use the green bin today? Yeah.
Chair, you're absolutely correct. The auditing function, if you will, in terms of resident performance and things is done in an anonymous fashion where all of the bags are collected and taken apart in order to understand, the degree of recycling and diversion and things like that. But that's done away from the curb and away from the site, and it is done with the intent of protecting that anonymity.
Thank you. Councillor Shirley and then Leeper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How many of these injuries have occurred over the last 60 years, and why haven't they been reported to committee?
I don't have the exact numbers, but certainly on average we get 1 or 2 needle pokes a year from my waste collection staff. We have probably 6 to 10 truck fires a year because of hazardous waste that has ignited within the truck. We've had chemicals backsplash on workers. So, those are followed through WSIB as claims on the city's WSIB forms. So
there is a process that of reporting and monitoring, but it doesn't come as normally to Environment Committee. Is that right?
Yeah, the city's health and safety department reports on WSIB claims and the number by department, by branch, by department across the city.
Thank you. Councillor Leeper? Yeah.
Thanks. And just a quick clarification. If I understand the change that's been accomplished with this amendment, the previous bylaw provided the city an inspection power on private property, but only in relation to dumping, I think, and now it would apply to the entire bylaw?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Seeing no other questions on this item? Carried with one dissent. Councillor Shirley. All right. Moving on then to the backflow prevention program. We have a brief presentation from staff. Is that Ms. McIntyre? Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Sally McIntyre. I'm the Manager of Environmental Business Services in the Environmental Services Department. So I'm here today to review with you a proposed backflow prevention program that's for your consideration. You can go ahead. Yeah, next one. Oops, sorry. Okay. So what is backflow? Backflow is an unintended reversal of flow back into the water supply. And it can occur when there's a drop of pressure in our system, i.e. during a water main break when there's water exiting our system, or when their customer's plumbing system fails in some manner, or there's some other activity on a customer's site that would increase pressure on their property above what we maintain in the water supply. So this differential in pressure can allow for contaminants to backflow into the water system and pose a health risk. So the way we prevent that is by installing what are called backflow prevention devices, BFDs, and ensuring that they're maintained and tested on a regular basis to make sure that they're working properly. So there is an extensive regulatory framework within which we are proposing to develop this. It includes the Ontario Building Code, CSA standards, the Infra Guide, our own water bylaw, and elements under our municipal drinking water license, which you would have heard about earlier today. So I'm going to walk through very quickly each of these. So the building code requires backflow prevention devices to be installed, but it's specific to severe and moderate risk areas and only for new construction. It exempts small residential buildings, but unless they have a separate well supply. So where there's the potential for cross-contamination between a well supply and our own, they require a backflow preventer. As I mentioned, it's new construction only, and it does not address the need for ongoing inspection and maintenance. Next. The CSA standard identifies 3 different classifications of hazard: severe, moderate, and minor. And it helps to municipalities and builders and owners to select the appropriate kind of backflow prevention devices and gives them guidance on how to maintain and inspect them on an ongoing basis. And it provides example types of devices for specific types of applications. Our current water bylaw does prohibit backflow. So in the event that a backflow prevention event was to occur, we have the wherewithal to seek damages. But it requires amendment to address the requirement for new and existing building stock to have them installed, to require the inspection and maintenance, and that they be performed by certified personnel. And that's a recommendation of the MOE CC. Next. So, as you heard earlier today, our quality management system has an outstanding action item in it that top management submit a report to this committee for the development and approval of a backflow prevention program, and we did commit to get back to you by this quarter. A couple of years back, our Auditor General, when he conducted an examination of our water system, recommended that we implement what was then called a cross-connection program, and we at that time did agree to pursue this. And lastly, an inspection report completed by the MOECC earlier this year said, implement a backflow prevention program in accordance with their guide as a best practice. So that's the guide that we are working to in the development of this program. So there's an extensive regulatory framework, and many, many other municipalities have gone this direction. So as an example, Toronto, Hamilton, London, Markham, and others. Most of them have a phase-in period, but they have different administrative approaches that they implement and some differences in program details. And therefore, what we'd like to do is, with your concurrence, to move forward with a consultation program to develop those kind of details for Ottawa. What we're proposing, and we'd like concurrence on today, if possible, is we want our program to only address severe and moderate, with the exception of, which includes, apartment buildings, but does not include low-density buildings, residential buildings. We would require new and existing properties to have backflow prevention devices. We want them to be installed and registered and undergo annual inspection. So the registration is needed so we can track the ongoing inspection. We want the work to be performed by certified technicians. This is not somebody a handyman weekend guy can do. And we want to require annual compliance reporting. You say you're going to do it, tell us, show us that you did it. We want to pursue an isolation approach. And basically this is, there are three different approaches that municipalities can take. Property premise isolation, which is what we're recommending. Internal protection. So this would be, for instance, if you had a large campus. Let's take Carleton U as an example. They have multiple buildings. Some of those buildings may not be subject to the bylaw, others might. So under an internal protection program, you would only require those buildings that fall under the severe and moderate program to install backflow prevention devices. On the property premise isolation, you would just say the water services coming into the campus, and I think there's maybe two, have to have the backflow prevention devices on them. And the premise property isolation system, which is what we're proposing, protects our system. And so it's probably the least complicated to administer, and that's why we're recommending it. There we go. So the cost to implement, this is going to affect approximately 13,000 of our over 200,000 customers. We are basing this looking at our profile of our different customers, so it's not an exact number. The cost that will vary between, we estimate, 500 to 20,000. That's based upon canvassing other municipalities to what they've experienced in their jurisdictions. And there will be a cost to ourselves in that we are the owners of many facilities that fall subject to severe or pose a severe or moderate risk. Over the 5 years that we're proposing to implement, it will cost a total of $3 million to retrofit our own facilities to install these backflow prevention devices. And then to inspect and maintain those devices on an ongoing basis will cost approximately $250,000 annually. So we are proposing that this program be administered on a full cost recovery basis. In other words, aside from the cost to ourselves to retrofit our facilities, the administration cost of this program will be borne by those who own the device. So that we will be coming back to you with registration fees that would help to recover our program administration costs. Another element will be there are challenges in some buildings in installing these backflow prevention devices, and they may want to come to us and ask for exemptions to not so much the bylaw, but the method to be employed at a particular site. And so we would be asking for fees to allow us to carry out a more detailed review of their complex to ensure adequate protection of the municipal water supply. We're proposing that the program be phased in over 5 years with focus on severe risk facilities to begin with, followed by moderate. And we would increase staff over that period. It wouldn't be a one-shot. We would phase it in over time. So, as mentioned, we'd like to, with approval from Committee and Council, proceed to a consultation phase with stakeholders to discuss in more detail some of these matters. We need to also review ourselves internally on our approach to both the administration of the program as well as the retrofit of our existing facilities. And we'd like to come back to you in Q1 next year with program details. And that's it.
Thank you very much. I've already started a speakers list, adding now. Just a few words, if I may, in advance. There have been references already to the session that was held earlier this morning at 8:30. We had a briefing on the Safe Drinking Water Act, what it is, what it's about, and what councillors' responsibilities are, hence a reference to the nitrates at the Shadow Ridge facility that already came up in questions there. In that context and responsibility of councillors, was really highlighted the need for diligence and oversight by council, starting here at Environment Committee, to keep our drinking water systems clean and safe. This program and our response to the ministry comes out of that obligation. So I'll turn first to Councillor Cloutier, then Brockington.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you for the presentation. You said you indicated it will be brought. The results of the consultation will be brought to council. It will be brought to this committee, and other stakeholders will have the opportunity to address this committee with their concerns or the results of that consultation. Is that's correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. This may be premature, but why the large spread from 500 to 20,000 in the cost of installation if it's property protected? Is that not just a one connection to from the city water system to the property owner's water system?
So, and going back to the Carleton University example, we're talking about a fairly significantly sized water service, and it might require an excavation and actually, Mr. Weir, what's the proper term for the access facility?
Well, there are also, there may be a need for the installation of structures outside of just the installation of a valve. Many commercial buildings or industrial commercial buildings, there are also mechanical rooms that may not provide sufficient space to install a backflow preventer, and so you may end up having to make more significant plumbing changes in order to accommodate. So what we're trying to do is paint a picture, you know, the more typical or lesser amounts all the way up to more dramatic, which we don't anticipate would be required very often, but certainly certain developments may require it.
Okay. You referred to certified personnel. Does a plumber install these? And I'm referring to the more moderate, who installs these devices?
So there are specific professions that can obtain the training. There is a certification for the installation of backflow prevention device, and local colleges have put on those programs in the past, and were we to proceed with this, would make that course available to technicians wishing to get that certification to perform those functions.
Generally, it's part of the plumbing profession?
Yes.
Okay. In terms of the City of Ottawa, what's the compliance timeline? Once passed by Council, what would be the compliance timeline for moderate and severe properties?
So those are the types of details we'd like to come back to you with. However, notionally, with the adoption by council of, that we're pursuing this program, that would serve as first notice that we would, as part of this, this report recommends an implementation date commencing January 1, 2017. So they would get, the notification based upon approval by council. We'd notify everybody that this is now coming forward, and so they'd have effectively a year to get things in order. But those kind of more details, we'd like to come back to you in Q1. These are notional right now.
This will be part of the consultation. Do we ever anticipate that it will become a retroactive requirement for regular property owners?
Chair, not at this point. We're doing a risk-based analysis, and certainly the severe and moderate are the focus of our attention at this point.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly the balance has to be struck with your timelines between what's the risk and the financial impact on these institutions, a lot of which are public entities or publicly funded entities whose budgets, like our own, are stretched to the maxes as well. And so, for those severe cases, sooner rather than later, but some of them may say, well, we need a little more time in order to get our financial affairs in order. We understand the necessity, but we need some flexibility here. So is there going to be some sort of public information campaign explaining why this is necessary? The report is very detailed, but it's technical in nature. We have, water bills are going up 6% year after year. We're going to have a new water rate. Now we're going to ask these large entities to invest in this infrastructure. So it's a triple whammy for many organizations. And I think we can help smooth things over if there's some sort of campaign that your department undertakes with these organizations in advance, not just, oh, by the way, here's your letter by this time next year, we expect the work to be done, but really try and explain to them why this is necessary, the advantages for the entire city, and why they've been targeted and maybe not others. So I'll just leave that with you, but I think that would be valuable. Jean asked about why some are less, some are more. Are there any provincial dollars that you're aware of to help organizations? No? Okay. And you have a cost factor for additional FTEs and vehicles. Are there any ways that those FTEs already exist in the system, or do we have to go ahead with new hires? Are there vehicles that we can use? You've seen the mayor's comments going into budget about not purchasing new vehicles, trying to extend the life of some vehicles. Can we save efficiencies there?
Certainly we'll be looking at those sorts of efficiencies and gains over time, but I think this is an entirely new program and services, and so this is additional work that the city's taking on. Whether or not we can absorb that within ongoing activities will be something that we will look at over time. But for the city, the intent here is to make this fully cost recoverable on the program so that there isn't a further pressure on the city's rate budget.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Chair. I just note that the time frame for completion is 2020. I just wonder if there is any practice or what the practice in place is today for us to pick up if we have a backflow. Like obviously, if it's our municipal systems that the pressure has dropped, we would know to go in and look for the problem. But what if today we have an example where we have a backflow, but it's the result of the plumbing system of the customer? How are we prepared to go in today and to make sure that there is no backflow that's compromising the water system?
It relies upon the person that's creating the overpressurization, if you will, to inform us of a problem. That was a situation that we became aware of at the incident at L'Esplanade Laurier some 10, 12 years ago, and that we then participated. In that particular incident, we were fortunate in that there wasn't a backflow into the city system, but there certainly was a backflow into the internal plumbing system that caused tremendous difficulty and response. So at this point, short of the bylaw prohibition against the backflow, we are reliant upon people who are experiencing that overpressurization and suspect that they may have discharged to inform us.
And how long would discharge from, say, an institutional building, such as L'Esplanade Laurier, how long could it take for that to enter our drinking water system or to have an effect on its surrounding neighbors?
Depending on where the backflow occurs or the overpressurization, it could be relatively quickly. In that particular instance, the location was well back from the city's connection, and so therefore there were lots of evidence of a backflow well prior to it getting to the city's drinking water system. But that's why I think we're suggesting and recommending that we look at the backflow into the city's system as the premise point for isolation to prevent that from coming back into the city system.
And just in terms of the number of apartment buildings, obviously many of them are downtown that will be affected. Do we know if any multi-residential buildings today have backflow protection already in place?
The Ontario Building Code has made a requirement for certain, I think it's severe, to have backflow prevention in place, and that change was made, I think, in 2006, and there are prohibitions against separating potable water from non-potable uses. But at this point, we don't have a detailed analysis or confirmation, if you will, of whether or not backflow prevention is in place and very importantly, are being maintained on an annual basis as recommended by the CSA. Because I think that's another important gain that this program would achieve, is insisting upon the regular maintenance of these devices, because they are complicated and they do require maintenance.
Sorry, just one last question then. For, say for a 27-story condo building, would it be, because I have a lot of those, I won't name any addresses, would it be property and premise protection? So would it be one backflow device for the entire building, or would it have to be several, like for each floor, every 6 floors, or is it one per building? And I know you're taking a bit of a wild guess, but between 500 and 20,000, what would be your best guess for we'll say 27 stories, just for heck?
So for the 27-story building, my best guess at this point would be that there would be a backflow prevention device installed as the premise as the city's drinking water service comes into the building, and then at any point in the building where there are conversion between potable use and non-potable use. For instance, there may be a connection to a hot water heating system makeup tank or something. There would also be a need under the building code for an isolation or backflow prevention at that location to prevent any of that from coming in and affecting the inside. But that second one that I speak of wouldn't be subject to this program. It would only be the premise isolation. But there may be more than one backflow prevention device within the building itself.
So am I correct then if I understand, any building built since 2006 would likely have a protection at that connection to non-potable water?
That requirement exists prior to that. It's the 2006 is the requirement for premise isolation. I think it's just in severe isolations? Severe and moderate, sorry, thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillor Middick.
Thanks, Chair. Several of my questions have already been answered, but I just had one about new construction only. Would that mean, because I've been dealing with this already with a golf course, everybody here might be aware of, new construction, if they wanted to install, like say, or even, I guess, even a 27-story condo, if they wanted to install a sprinkler system for their lawn, would that be considered new construction? Or is the building itself the new construction?
In terms of requiring the backflow prevention, I think the building code, for instance, if I'm not mistaken, for sprinkler systems requires backflow prevention at the point of it, because it's now becoming non-potable water. And there is the risk of contamination, so that's a requirement under the Ontario Building Code, not necessarily under this program. The advantage of this program is that it would apply not only for new construction, but also for existing infrastructure or building stock, because that represents a significant risk to the city's drinking water system as well. And so this program takes it from just applying to new building stock to all building stock.
Right, okay, good. And just, can I ask for a ward breakdown of how many severe cases we're dealing with? So I can prepare
because
for
we're not able to pinpoint exactly who is severe or not, we classify them. So shopping malls, hospitals, barber shops. So we can tell you the types of facilities that will be regulated under this, but we can't tell you how many per ward.
Thank you, that's good.
Thank you. Councillor Moffat.
Thank you. I'm just curious about a couple things. So obviously this program used to be called the Cross Connection Control Program, correct? So in 2008, you had a report to Planning and Environment Committee titled The Protection of Municipal Drinking Water from Cross Connections. The recommendation of the report was to direct staff to develop a cross connection control program in accordance with the parameters set out herein with the reports. Some of those parameters were developing the program on a cost recovery basis, focused on businesses, institutions, multi-residential buildings, exclude low-density residential buildings, have a phased-in 5-year period. This looks really familiar to what we have right here. This is 7 years ago. Can you just tell me what happened with that report and how that program went? Because this is the same program.
This is essentially building on that program and implementing that program. That report that you speak to asked staff to come back with an implementation report. That wasn't achieved, and so what we're asking is renewing that initiative with the intent of coming back with the implementation plan and proceeding with the implementation of the plan.
So I hope we didn't spend too much time drafting this report, considering this report is exactly the same as that report.
It's intended to achieve the same things, yes.
So nothing happened in 7 years?
In terms of progress on this particular issue, on the implementation of the backflow prevention program, no.
So what's our confidence level that the next 7 years are going to be better than the last 7?
Very high, because with Council's approval today and with the commitment of the Drinking Water Quality Management System, there is renewed impetus to go forward with this, and a recognition that backflow does represent a risk to the city's drinking water system. So I'm very comfortable that this will be implemented with committee and Council's approval.
Did you have Council's approval in 2008?
With the policy approval previously.
And then just in 2012, we did have another section on cross connections to deal with residential cross connections. Whatever happened with that?
That program, and therein lies the need for the change. That cross connection program dealt with the sanitary sewer system and cross connections between sanitary and storm. That program is implemented and is achieving its objective already. For reasons of confusion, we felt it best to change the title so that there wasn't this confusion, that we would move to backflow prevention on this program and away from the cross connection.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions on this item? Councillor Kakish.
Thank you, Chair. And I think Councillor Cloutier and Brockington touched upon what I wanted to ask, but you mentioned some of the other municipalities that have gone through this process, and just wondering on that front what they had to deal with in terms of the institutions or the organizations that had to pay for installing these devices, and were there any sort of financial sort of incentives or programs in place to assist if the cost was high for those institutions?
When we surveyed several municipalities, none were providing financial assistance.
Okay. And so was it generally one lump sum that they would pay for the installation, or did they mortgagize it on their own, or do we have any information on that?
So it would be up to each building owner or manager to either retain directly a plumber or to hire an engineering firm or some advisor to help them move through that process. Yes, there's the initial capital cost to install the device and any, other sort of works associated with that, and then secondarily for the annual inspection and reporting.
Okay. And I see, too, in other municipalities, you talk about how they have two staff that are fully dedicated to operating and maintaining this program, and I also see that it's the cost recovery program, we expect it to pay for itself, but, echo again what Councillor, I think, Brockington mentioned about the costs and the fiscal challenges that we have. So I assume we have some plumbers kicking around at the city, and to take a look hard at that, as well as with our Public Works Department, and in terms of the fleet, instead of purchasing new vehicles and looking internally, because those are also long-term costs for the city in terms of operations in the long term as well. So I'll ask you to take that back as well. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions, comments on this item? All right. Councillor Moffat.
Just one more question about what I was talking about with the 2008 report. If we approve that, why is that not still valid?
Chair, we felt that it was more important to come forward with committee at this point to renew, because there wasn't the continuity back in 2008 to now. We felt it was important to bring this council up to speed as we began with the implementation, and to bring it ahead rather than try to move ahead on a 2008 council commitment that is now 2 full terms expired.
So why don't you just give us an update, and then we just receive the update? I understand what we're not really approving anything new here because it's already been approved.
Basically, we felt that this was the best approach, and that now this committee and council are approving that and are fully cognizant, have had an opportunity to have that discussion, and the timelines are now determined as 2017 through 20. I think there are some important details and updating that is provided by this report that council will benefit from, and certainly as will the IC&I sector as we head out to consultation.
Thanks.
And a comment from our legal department, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, and I know occasionally this has come up in the past, and either Mr. O'Connor or Ms. Donnelly has addressed this, similar to what the GM has just said. There it could be an implication that because it was approved by a previous council but not implemented for the reasons that were stated, that it hasn't been approved or endorsed by this particular council. So just to say that from a strict procedural perspective, I think it is well-founded on the part of the GM and his staff to bring the matter forward to this term of council for approval going forward.
Thank you. Then on this item, is it carried? Dissent from Councillor Moffat. Okay. Moving on, then, we had the schoolyard tree planting program update that was held. Trying to recall, Councillor Brockington, was it?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I firmly support the tree planting program that we have with our schools, and I'm pleased that that the report is requesting or directs council to reaffirm our support for this program for this term of council, which I strongly endorse. Just reading some of the meat of the report, it talks about some of the criteria about who can apply for this program. And the report indicates that applications are accepted from student or parent councils, environmental garden clubs, or other not-for-profit interest groups associated with the school. Applications from principals, teachers, or other reps are not eligible. Why is that the case?
We're looking for buy-in at the school level, somebody who has interest in long-term maintenance. So once they do the installation, create the project, they're there to kind of carry it through for usually their
their child's time at the school, so they get 3 or 4 years of maintenance and some buy-in of the project.
When you say maintenance, what does that entail? That we expect members of the community to water the tree, prune the tree?
Primarily just the watering and making sure that the tree is doing okay. They can call and ask for us to come and kind of advise them once in a while if there looks to be problems in the project, but the primary thing that they're committing themselves to is watering through the summer season when there's no staff on site.
There are many schools in this city, for multiple reasons, that don't have active school councils, that don't have partnerships with community organizations, and yet the CEO, the leader, the champion of that school is the school principal, because she knows what that community needs. She knows who's out there. She's the grant writer for all the other grants that schools are trying to acquire funds for, whether it's play structure rehab or school breakfast program dollars or whatever. And I would just think that we should not be having criteria in place that excludes very active members of the school community who could perhaps apply and show that there is support from some broader community who could help foster the success of that tree. But, you know, I've toured basically all but one schools from all boards of my ward now in this first year, and trees are high on their list of need. And I think that we should not have criteria in place that would exclude the principal, but if a principal is going to apply for the grant, that she proves that there's a broader support that through the summer that tree will be taken care of. So I would ask you to, I know this is a report for information, consider that, because there are many schools that are just open fields. Kids have no shade, that trees are valuable resources. And we should be allowing whomever that's affiliated with those schools to apply and not having this criteria to exclude them. So I feel very strongly about that with my experience with the schools, and would just ask you to reconsider that, please.
We'll take that away. The one thing I can say is that through the grants over the years, we've been able to build strong relationships with the boards that then have, and in the recent years with Emerald Ash Borer, the boards have started to put money back into tree planting. So they've actually, the board themselves have committed to going into those schools that don't have as strong parent councils. So it actually has been starting to, the legwork that's been done over the last 10 or 15 years has paid off to kind of help we're getting rid of the have and have-nots through the good work that's been done at both the board and the city to try and promote tree planting.
Thank you. And it was suggested to me by Vice Chair Shirelli that a future action report we might look at the language around that and other ways in which we're not excluding groups where there is still a commitment to maintain those trees, but they would qualify.
Mr. Chair, we'll take that as direction.
Thank you very much. Unless there are other questions on this item, then, is it carried? Received, in this case. All right, which takes us to the final held item, the Carlsbad Trickle Feed System frontage charge. Yeah, this was held for a question. Was that, I'm trying to recall, was that Carlsbad Trickle Feed? No. May have been carried. My mistake. Hate to hold an item unnecessarily. All right. Well, that takes us then to the end of our agenda items. I'm not aware of notices of motions or inquiries. Other business? Then on adjournment. Thank you very much.